I'm gonna show you how to make character mods for Payday by replacing chains with this random model I have kicking around my hard drive. So first we're gonna need to download FMODEL, which will allow us to extract the game's files. Extract it wherever you want and then launch the program. Once you're in FMODEL, go to Dictionary and then click on Selector. We're gonna need to add Payday to the list of detected games. Click on the Add Games option and add whatever name you feel like. To get the games directory, go to Steam, right-click the game, Manage, and then Browse Local Files. You can then just copy and paste the directory, click the little plus sign, and now it'll appear as a detected game. Then set the UE version to UE27 and click OK. As you can see, these packages are greyed out. That's because they're encrypted. To get around this, we're going to need to input an encryption key. To do this, go to Dictionary, AES, and then copy and paste this key. It'll be in the description. If this key ever becomes outdated in the future, you could probably find the updated one in the pinned messages of the Mod Workshop Discord. So now that you've got the key in, you can just press OK and all of those greyed out packages should light up. Now to load them all, we're gonna select the loading mode to all and then click the load button. And now we have access to all of Payday's resources. So to replace chains, first we're gonna need to find his suit. This will be in characters, suits, and then chain starting suit. Click on it and you'll be able to see that there are two packages in it. You can double click on these packages to see what assets they are. Because we're only interested in the models, we're going to right click on the folder and select Save Packages Models. You can tell they're exporting properly because the little bar at the bottom will go orange and say Loading. It might take a while, but once the bar goes back to blue, the models have finished exporting. You'll be able to find them in FMODEL, Output, and Export. Here you'll see it's also exported all of the materials and textures which were linked to the model. We won't worry about that though. Just go to the folder where your models were in FMODEL. If the two models are there and in PSK format, then congrats. You've done it correctly and we can move on to the next step, which will be in Blender. But Blender doesn't natively support the PSK file format, so we're gonna need to download an add-on for it. We're gonna need two add-ons for this to work. The first is called Blender 3D Import PSK PSA, which you can find here online. The second one will be called Import Export FBX, which will allow us to export our models as FBX files. This one's already in the add-ons page on Blender, so you don't need to download anything. Just type FBX in the search bar and enable it. Now that we've done that, we can import the PSK file into Blender. You might notice that this model just doesn't have enough of a skeleton to do a full character change. That's because we're just using this model to take count of the UVs. Navigate to the model and go to Data and UV Maps, and take count of how many UV maps there are. As you can see, there's 4 on this model. Now the model that we're going to get the skeleton from is in NPC and Civilian. I'd recommend getting Civ Mail 01, so just export the model like you did with the suit. Now we're going to delete Chains' suit and import the NPC model and the model we're going to be replacing Chains with. Now that you've got both of the models in, you're going to need to pose your model until it lines up with the NPC. Make sure you remember to turn mirror on, if it's applicable for your model. And take your time as this can be extremely finicky. I'm going fast just to show you for the tutorial, but if you're doing this for real, you probably want to check how it looks in game and modify it a bit to get it looking good, especially the fingers. Holy shit, the fingers. Now that that's done, you want to go back to object mode, go back to the mesh, click on modifiers and duplicate the armature, and apply one of them. Your model's probably looking a bit fucked up now, but it's fine. Go back to pose mode, hold down Ctrl and A, and click apply pose as rest pose. Now we need to launch another Blender instance. And in this instance we want to import our NPC. In both instances you want to select the armature, then your mesh, and then go to weight painting. You'll now be able to see the weights of your mesh by going to data and clicking on the vertex groups, or by control clicking on a bone in the armature. You can also move the bones here to see what's connected to what. Now we're going to need to compare the vertex groups of your mesh and the NPC. We're going to need to copy the name of the closest vertex group from the NPC and paste it into your mesh. And we're going to need to do this for every vertex group in your mesh. Now here you can see there's a vertex group on my mesh which doesn't correspond to anything on the NPC. There's two ways we can fix this. The first is by manually painting over the weights. The second is by merging it with another vertex group. You can do this by going to modifiers, adding a vertex weight mix, adding the two groups you want to merge into A and B, setting the vertex set to A or B, and changing the mix mode to add. Then apply the modifier, delete whatever group you put into the B slot, and you'll see both groups have merged into one. All that's left to do now is to apply transformations by pressing A, Ctrl A, and then all transformations. Delete the NPC's mesh and your model's skeleton, and then parent your mesh to the NPC's skeleton by clicking on your model, Control clicking on the NPC's skeleton, holding Ctrl P and selecting empty groups. If you've done everything correctly, you should be able to move the NPC's skeleton and your mesh will move accordingly. Of course, if your mesh doesn't have a skeleton or you don't feel like renaming a bunch of groups, you can always just do it with empty weights and weight paint the bones yourself. Remember when I told you to count the UV maps? This is why. Go into your mesh's UV maps and make sure there is the same number of them as there were in the suit. So for me, I'll need to do 4 of them. Now, go into UV editing. For every UV map except the top one, we're gonna need to get rid of them. Not by deleting them, but by making them really small. We can do this by pressing A to select all of the vertices, pressing S to scale, and then pressing 0 to set the scale to 0. Then press enter and do this for the rest of them. If you don't do this correctly, when you import your model into Payday 3, it will have random grey patches over it. And we're done. So go to File, Export, and FBX. I'd recommend when saving to rename your model to the name of the model that you're going to be replacing in Payday. And make sure that in Armature in the export window, you disable Add Leaf Bone. However, to completely replace chains, there are 2 models we need to replace. This replaces the TPP model, which stands for third person perspective, so it's going to be what everyone else is seeing. However, in order to also replace the first person hands, we're going to need to replace the FPP model. Luckily, this is really easy to do now that we've done the TPP model. The FPP model is basically just the TPP model, but only the arms and hands. So go into edit mode, select the arms and hands, press Ctrl and I to inverse the selection, and then press delete vertices to delete everything else. So that's it for the FPP model. Just export it the same way as the TPP model, change its name, and make sure you've got leaf bones disabled. Now we can launch Unreal Engine. Make sure you're using version 4.27.2. Once it's open, you need to select Game, Blank, and then No Starter Content on the final window. Then you can name your project whatever you want and create it. Now that Unreal Engine's open, go back to FMODEL and go back to the files you're trying to replace. Take note of the file structure above it. The content in FMODEL corresponds to the content in the Unreal Engine, so you just have to copy the files after that in FMODEL. So you can see here that the files we need to create are characters, suits, and then chain starting suit. Now we can import our FBX files just by dragging and dropping them into the Unreal Engine. Default settings are fine. Yeah, we don't give a shit about this pop-up window. Anyway, drag your model onto the scene just to check its size. It should be roughly this size on the scene. If it's the wrong size, most likely it'll be by a factor of 100. So you've just got to change the scale when exporting in Blender. Now you might notice that our model has no texture. At the time of recording, you can't just make your own materials for Payday, so we're gonna have to piggyback off a master material that's already in the game. In this tutorial, we're gonna use the helicopter interior master material. Here it is in FMODEL, and as with the suit, we're going to need to take note of the folder structure and recreate it in Unreal Engine. And here is where we create a dummy version of the master material. As with all other files and folders in Unreal Engine, make sure it's named the exact same thing as in FMODEL, minus the file extension. And now we've got to recreate the material. Luckily, some people from the modding community have already made some very good resources to help with this. This is an image made by Uncells, which shows a layout which we can easily copy to recreate the material. The two blue boxes are texture sample parameter 2Ds. You can create them by right-clicking anywhere on the screen and entering their type in the box that appears. Then you name them. Make sure to name them the exact same thing as on the image. Like everything, they're cap sensitive. Now for the brown box, it is a vector parameter when you create it. The rest of the boxes have their type written above them, so you can really easily create them just by right-clicking and typing their name in. This is except the one box at the bottom. For that, you have to hold 1 and right-click to create a 0, which you can then change the value of on the left-hand side of the page. Click the save button in the top left, and that's the master material done. Now we create the material instance to piggyback off the master material. You can name this anything, but, just to be nice, start it with capital MI and then an underscore. Now that you've made your material instance, open it up and drag and drop the master material into the parent slot. Now you can add your texture. Drag and drop it into the folder, enable the albedo in the material instance, and then drag your texture into it. I'm leaving the normal map blank because I don't have one, but if you want to make one, here's a surface painter preset which is also made by Uncells. Now we need to open the texture. I forgot to record it, but you should change the compression to BC7. And unless you've made your own textures in Surface Painter, change the max alpha to 0, because otherwise you'll get the dreaded yellow texture. And now click save, and your material's done. You can now go back to your models, open them up, and drag and drop the material instance into the material slot. If you've got multiple material slots, you can make multiple material instances. And we would be done now if we were changing the model of an NPC. However, we're changing one of the player characters. So if we load up into the game with this is what it'll look like. So to fix this, we've got to find out which assets are overlapping and remove them. For chains, this would be his head, mask, mask strap, and gloves. So we've just got to find them in FMODEL. However, Overkill are a little bit silly, and some of the heisters share gloves. Pearl shares hers with Joy, and Chains shares his with Hoxton. So because of that, we've got to replace Hoxton's gloves to get rid of Chains' gloves. So in Blender, we're going to import the model, remove the model, create a plane using Shift A, and scale it down to 0.0001 by pressing S and then editing the values in the bottom right. If you've made it too small, you'll know if you get this error in Unreal Engine. Parent the plane to the model's armature, and export it like before, remembering to name it the same as the model you're replacing and remembering to disable the leaf bone. Now once you've done that, you can import them into Unreal Engine, but remember to recreate the folder structures for the file that you see in FMODEL. Now repeat that for every model you need to get rid of. And, as a quick time saver, if the model has an FPP variant, you can just rename the TPP and call it a day, as I'm showing here. And now that you've got every model that needs replacing in Unreal Engine, with the correct name and the correct directory, it's time to cook them. Go to File and click Save All. Then, go to File again and click Cook Content for Windows. To view the cooked files, right-click on anything in your Unreal Engine folder and click on Show in Explorer. Then click on whatever you named your project at the top, go to Saved, Cooked, Windows No Editor, your project name again, and finally Content. This is where your cooked files are stored. Now we need to package these files to make our mod. Make a new folder anywhere on your computer with the name of your mod on it. Inside it, we need to copy folder directories from FMODEL again. The first folder will be Payday 3 and the second folder will be Content. Now just drag and drop your cooked folders into your Content folder. Go through and remove any master material and skeleton files from your mod. These are the ones that start with or end with _skeleton respectively. To turn this folder into a pack, we're going to need a pack writer. I'm using a version of Unreal Pack Tool which supports compression. The link to it is in the description. If you don't trust it or the link dies, then you can use Repack to make your files instead. Simply drag and drop your folder onto the batch file that says with compression, and the pack file will be made. Now we're gonna go to Payday's files and go to Payday 3, Content, and then Packs. If you haven't already, make a folder called ~mods. Drag and drop the pack into the mods folder. And now is the final step. Go to Payday 3's properties and in launch options, enter -file open log, and you're done. Now you can launch the game and see the fresh horrors you've created. And yes, first person also works, although the animations are a little janky because I rushed a bit with the bones. So go forth and create. The workshop needs more furry mods. And if there's anything I find out later that impacts this video, they'll either be in the pinned comment or in the description. And because I haven't credited him enough, I want to give another thanks to Encels for putting up with my non-existent Blender knowledge and helping make sure I'm not spreading misinformation online.